learn more about how to believe in yourself and have more confidence, this video is for you. Every month inside of my Go Beyond Yourself life coaching membership, I bring in guest speakers. And last week's guest speaker was so good. I pulled some of the juicy tidbits from the interview and put them together in this video clip to share with you. Kathy Kidd is who I interviewed, and Kathy is someone who has gone from debilitating fear, struggling with agoraphobia, which is the fear of leaving your home, to becoming a impactful, inspirational woman who has helped over 600 authors become bestsellers. And she's sharing some of her story with us. So take a look at today's video, and if you're like, I don't know who you are, my name is Davita, and I help women just like you overcome their limiting beliefs, find the confidence that they need to do more, be more, and achieve more so they can live the life they dream of. So with that being said, take a look at the clip from last week's interview. Lived for a really long time. Is it agoraphobia? Is that
Agoraphobia.
agoraphobia? Okay, and that is basically the fear of being outside of an environment that you feel safe in.
And it really manifested in my mid 20s to get to the worst point where my agoraphobia made me have panic attacks. And just out of the blue, like there was one point where I couldn't feel my right leg, and I knew I was walking and I knew I was driving and I had to get home to be safe, but I couldn't feel my leg. And
Oh,
my heart just pound, and I'm like panicked, and I felt so unsafe, and all I wanted to do was just get home. And so I started staying at home more and more, to the point where the phone ringing would get my heart pounding. Somebody knock at the door, or doorbell, get my heart pounding. Thought of going outside to go to the mailbox, I just couldn't. There was a point for 3 months I did not leave my house to even check the mail.
wow.
So it was quite a process to come out of that,
Mm-hmm.
but in it was dark. So I
Yeah.
started going seeing a therapist every other week, and that was my outing. Through that help, I was able to start going out, and it was initially it would be to the pharmacy. The one place I felt safe in going, I would go to the pharmacy for 15 minutes every other week. And then it was 15 minutes every week. And then it was 30 minutes every week, and a little bit more and a little bit more. I had to do things like I would schedule it during certain traffic times so that I wouldn't feel anxiety in traffic, but I would feel safe that if my car broke down, I could take the bus, just because it was part of my fear, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I would do all these things to feel safer. Have a phone, because back then, most people didn't have cell phones, but I had a cell phone. And I did a little bit more and a little bit more. But I'll tell you, even though I today speak on stages to over 6,000 people, I still dread the grocery store.
Mm, yeah.
So I'll go like early in the morning or late at night when it's not as crowded. I had to prioritize, and the grocery store was always the bottom of that list. And
Right.
I continued to get support, and I continued to work on myself. Self-help stuff at home, therapy. 99.9% of it was here. And then all of that preparation, this is how I see it in hindsight, all of that preparation and work that I did, when I met Lisa Nichols, she took all of that goodness, all of the stuff that I had done at home with my business, because I was at home on my business all the time, and then all of the work I had been doing on myself, but I was still hiding. My social media square was a flower. It wasn't a picture of my face.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I met her and started working with her, she took all of that and just catapulted me. Now, if I hadn't done the work, it wouldn't have done me any good to meet her, learn from her. I would have had to do all that work.
Right.
But
Right.
because I had been working on it for so long, it really catapulted me. And the
Yeah.
first thing she told me was that people were waiting on my message, that I had something of quality to give, and that it wasn't about me. It wasn't, I didn't have to lose enough weight. I didn't have to get enough training. I didn't have to have the wardrobe. I just had to have something of quality to give people, and they were waiting on me. And
Mhm.
so that pushed me into offering something to share.
Yeah.
And that made all the difference and changed my life astronomically. And
Yeah.
here's the thing, especially talking about life coaching, I'm so glad you brought that up because I did the traditional therapy. I bought all the books, I did my self study at home. I had CDs that I listened to in the car. I did that and I made progress. I made major progress.
Mhm.
But the the stuff that really catapulted me was when I actually had a life coach. And since then, I've learned to hire a life coach for any part of my life that I want to improve, which is actually what Oprah said years ago. She has a life coach for every area of her life she wants to improve. I wouldn't do it any other way now.
Yeah.
And if I could do it differently, if I knew then what I know now, I would have gotten a life coach in my 20s
Same.
because traditional therapy, they want you to process everything on your own. They can't give you the answers, whereas a life coach can say, I see this for you and here's the path, and then it's your responsibility to do it. I'm an
Mhm.
action taker, so if
Yeah.
you just tell me do it and this is your result, then I will do it. And I've done that. I've had more improvement in, well, I'll just even say the first 2 years that I was with Lisa, she was my first coach that I hired at that time. In the first 2 years with Lisa, my life improved probably, no kidding, 500%. I mean, literally, my business alone increased by 800% in the first year.
Amazing.
Yeah. Life coach makes all the difference. Now I fast track everything. When I became single 2 years ago, I hired a life coach for dating to fast track me. I didn't want to make the mistakes and figure it out on my own. I wanted a life coach, guide me, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. I do it for everything. I do it for my business. I do it for my financing. I do it for investment. I do it for life management, self development, everything.
Yeah.
In different cycles for whatever I need at the time. But now I wouldn't do it any other way.
And to
Yes.
make things, less I have to figure it out on myself, because I think that's where people get stuck, right? You get stuck in confusion because when you're confused, you do nothing. A confused mind just sits idle.
Yeah.
So having somebody there to like point you in the right direction and see the blind spots that you can't see, because we all have them. I have a coach, you know what I mean? Like, and there's always blind spots that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that I was doing that, or I didn't realize that that was a pattern, or whatever the case is. So
Right. Right.
that's
And
awesome.
I heard this great analogy not too long ago that, especially because life coaches in particular, I have a lot of clients who are life coaches. I specialize in books and bestsellers, but I
Hmm.
have a lot of clients who are life coaches. And some of them won't hire life coaches because they think they're supposed to know everything because they're a life coach. Well, and they get frustrated. But here's the one thing that all of us can relate to that I heard: you can't see the label if you're inside the jar.
Yeah.
Other people can see for you from the outside, especially someone who's experienced and 10 steps ahead of you, because there's always somebody 10 steps behind, 10 steps ahead of us, right?
Yeah.
But they can see something for you that you can't see for yourself.
Yeah.
So,
I can actually relate to that because there was a point in my life where I felt like I needed to have the answers. I needed to not look weak in the eyes of other people. And if I didn't have the answer, or if I looked like I needed help and support, then who's going to work with me? I mean, this was years ago, but what I learned in all of that is that that was actually a trauma response that was rooted in an area in my way back in my childhood, where I felt like I needed to be who other people expected me to be. And so when I healed from that, I no longer felt the need to have all the answers. Like it just kind of went away. Like I mean, you have to do the mindset work to process through it, but
right,
that feeling deep inside just kind of started to slowly diminish and evaporate and was no longer there.
yeah. That was actually one of my biggest obstacles as well. Um, Mine came from my childhood. I grew up the daughter of a doctor, and so everything on the surface was very polished and perfect. At home, it was a nightmare. He was abusive. It was, horrible. There was drugs and alcohol involved, and but out in public, everything had to be polished and perfect. So I was
Mhm.
raised that way. And the truth is that we all have issues.
Mhm.
And one of the first things Lisa taught me was I don't have to be a certain size. I don't have to have a certain wardrobe. I don't have to live in a certain place. I just need to have something of quality to share. And then I have to be willing to be visible, vulnerable, and authentic.
Yeah.
And it's in our mess that people relate to us. It's in that humanity that
Yeah.
people relate. Because
Yes.
when you have somebody, like my favorite example that I share always with my authors is if you look at Barbara Walters and Oprah Winfrey, both amazing in journalism. In fact, Oprah wanted to be Barbara Walters at one point. But Barbara Walters is very polished. I don't know anything about her except her career and all that polished perfection that she puts out in the world. Oprah, we have seen her lose and gain weight. We have seen her do the ugly cry. We've cheered on her instead when to get married, which they'll never do. But we know about her childhood traumas. So when Oprah has something to say, I'm going to listen. Like, girl has been there, done that.
Mhm.
So I trust what she has to say. If Barbara Walters has something to say, I'm like, nah, she doesn't get me. She's never been where I am. She doesn't
Yeah.
understand what it's like to be my size or have trauma. She has an endless bank account. That's our automatic human response is she doesn't get me. Whereas
Yeah.
Oprah, like I can relate to her. She's been vulnerable. I get her. She gets me.
Yes.
So the truth is, Barbara Walters probably has all those things as well. But because she comes off as so polished and perfect, my initial response is I don't know, like, and trust her because all she's given me is fake.
Yeah.
All she's given me is the perfection.
Yes.
So for me, overcoming that was huge. It made all the difference in my life, and I share it with all my clients.
Yes, for sure. And that's a hurdle, like to get over that and to because it's being vulnerable,
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
world. It's being so vulnerable. Even when I wrote my book, there was I reached out to you and I'm like, okay, I'm struggling just a little bit because I feel like this is being super vulnerable. But I have gotten, I think there's 25 reviews on my book right now. And I hear from people, that because it was so vulnerable, that's why people relate to it. That's why people connect to it. That's why people reach out to me, and want to know more about what I'm doing. Because I think it takes more strength to actually be vulnerable than it does to not, which a lot of people have kind of backwards, right? Like, I got to look strong, but being vulnerable is actually the
Yes.
strength.
Yeah. Because I'm afraid of being judged.
Yeah.
But when I focus on who I'm helping and what they're getting, the fear goes away and I can do it anyway.
Yeah.
So focus on who you're helping because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like if you're willing to be visible, vulnerable, and authentic in order to get them what they need, that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think it's important to remember at all times too that you can hold being uncomfortable, right? Like, you can hold I'm uncomfortable. I don't I'm scared. I don't want to do this. At the same time, you can also hold, but I do want to do this because I want to help people. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Absolutely.
sometimes we feel like we have to feel one or the other.
Hmm.
And so we have a hard time, like, we get stuck in this place of confusion
Hmm.
because we're like, oh, I don't know, should I or shouldn't I or should I or shouldn't I? Always go with what feels scary and run towards that. Like, I always tell people, even like in retraining, because when we go through the different fears that we have and the limiting beliefs and overcoming the traumas, there's a nervous system component to that where your actual nervous system gets trained to respond a specific way to certain situations. And the only way to start breaking that pattern is to do the healing. First of all, you have to be willing to, like you put it earlier, do the work. You have to be willing to do the work. but then also just be able to accept that you have both things. I want to do it, I don't want to do it, and run towards that thing that feels scary. And you know, when you say like knowing that it's not for everybody is such an impactful and huge statement. Just reiterate that you said that, because I feel like that is true whether you have a business or not, whether you're a parent, whether you're in a marriage, whether you're single, what you're doing in your life. One, it doesn't have to please everybody. It's not for everybody. And just because someone judges you or criticizes you doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just might mean that it's not right for them. And
Yeah.
that's 100% fine. Like, let it not be right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And those who your information is for, they're hungry for it.
Authentic really needs to be a verb,
Mm.
because we are continually uncovering and getting rid of the things that we don't need anymore to rediscover the us that we originally were, and that we're meant to be before all the stuff started piling on top of us
Uh,
and fogging over who we really are and how we can show up in the world. And so I'm like, I don't know like who I need to talk to, but there needs to be like another definition for authentic as a human, because it's not a noun. It literally, to me, it is a verb. Becoming more and more authentic is doing the work. It's learning who you are. It's discovering your likes, your dislikes, like all the things that, I don't know. For me, like at over 40, you just go, okay, I'm getting too old for this crap. Like,
yes. So true. So
I'm,
true. Yeah.
I'm like, you get to the point to where you're just tired of shoving stuff down and not dealing with it and living in a space that doesn't feel authentic to you. And so that's the journey. Like the journey of into being more authentic is getting rid of everything. And so,
Um, so if you've ever seen the movie Runaway Bride, there's a scene in the movie where I think it's Richard Gere comes in and she's got like all these eggs out on the counter in her kitchen, all these different kind of eggs. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Well, when I was with Robert, I had scrambled eggs with dill. And when I was with John, we had sunny side over. And when I was with Brian, it was over easy. And with so and so, it's hard boiled. I don't know what kind of eggs I like." That's been my 40s for me. I want to know what kind of eggs I like. I'm no
yes.
longer taking care of my mom. I'm no longer raising my kids. I even moved on from a marriage that was just not salvageable. And I am happier than I've ever been before because I'm more authentic than I've ever been before.
Yeah,
Because, like, if people don't like it, they're just not my people.
exactly.
And the people that I'm for, they love everything about me that's really me.
Yes.
So I don't want to be anything other than authentic. So I
No.
now get to discover and enjoy what kind of eggs I like.
Yeah. So you mentioned, going through your divorce. And could we take a little extra minute and unpack that a little bit? Because
And
I
I
know.
said that time and time again for a couple of years leading up to it, to the point where I was just done. I was just done. And it means we had to separate a business, a house, uh, almost 20 years of stuff, 5 children. Like, thank God they're all, raised out of the house and doing their thing. But it was a huge shift. And I had also been convinced that no man would want me because of my size. So I got to the point where I would rather be alone than be married to him, because I felt like I needed to have the freedom to make my choices for whatever I wanted.
Right.
Well, shortly after I found out, no, there's a lot of men who actually want me in my size. So that was a wonderful thing to find out on top of everything else. And since then it's been a learning experience of I kind of like I hired coaches. How do I be single? How do I date? How do I do this new business, because we had to separate the business and reestablish um, coaches. I hired coaches,
Mhm.
and it fast forwarded me. And so initially it was that whole counter full of eggs. I tried this, I tried that, I tried this, I tried that. And it was fun and it was great. And then the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
alone through a pandemic. So there were lots of ups and downs of, I'm really happy to be alone. I'm really struggling with being alone. And okay, it's going to be all right to be alone. And dating ups and downs, these new things. So I'm happier than I've ever been before. And I'm still trying all these new things. Like I just got to Seattle last week. So being the digital nomad, this is new. It's another new thing I'm trying.
Yeah.
I think there's no end destination. I think it's just the journey. And I have moments where it's completely, totally solid bliss. And then I have moments where it's unsure.
Mm.
But I'm willing, especially because I have the support of coaches, I'm willing to do those new things quicker, faster, sooner, and try more things quicker, faster, sooner, because I want the next. But it's really about the journey and not the destination. Because
Yeah.
when you get to the end, you stop growing. And when you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, if they're looking to, because you take authors, you give them. This is what I loved about working with you. So my first book took me like 2 years to write. But it was also because I wasn't in a hurry. I had never written a book before. It was something I kind of wanted to do. And so I just got started. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a timeline. I want it to be done by now. The biggest hurdle I faced was, how do you know when it's done? Right? Like, because during that 2 years, you keep learning and growing and you keep like learning new things. And I'm like, oh, I get to put this in the book, right? So, but then
So
when
it'll
I wrote
never
my,
be done.
it'll never be done, right? So finally, I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna publish it, right? So I just published it, and that was that. But when I worked with you, I literally from start to finish had my book done and published in 3 months. You gave me an outline to follow, which was super easy to follow. How to put the stories in, where to put them, how to create an introduction that draws people in, all the way up to, and this was the part I didn't have any knowledge of at all the first time I wrote a book, so it was not a bestseller, was how to actually market that book and get it on Amazon in the right places so that more people will see it and your book will have a greater impact. And it was such a seamless, easy process. Like A to Z. I know I asked you a million questions because I'm an overachiever,
That,
but
that lights me up every time I hear it.
it
Because
was,
that's my purpose and what I enjoy doing, and that's what lights me up. So thank you
and
for that.
and you do it so well. Like you are, I mean, and I send people your way if they're like, because I get people that come to me and they ask about writing a book, and I'm like, I wrote a book. I don't know how to teach you how to write a book, but Kathy does, right? Like, I mean, I can answer some questions, but I don't have a formula. I just know what clicked in my head and how I did it. But when I followed it your way, I got it done a lot faster. I got it done a lot easier. I was less confused. It was just great. So if there are people who are looking to write a book, whether they be in this group or they find this on YouTube or whatever, what is some contact information for you where they can reach out to you to figure out, like, how do I write my bestseller?
Well, the number one best thing to do is go to bestsellersguild.com. bestsellersguild.com. And that goes right into our Facebook group, the Bestsellers Guild. It's been around since 2015. We have over 3,400 authors, all different levels, people who have published multiple books and are bestsellers, people who are still aspiring and learning to write, and everyone in between. It's a free group. That's where you should come and hang out. That's the number one thing. Now, to get a hold of me directly, facebook.com/Kathy Kidd, KATHYKIDD. Reach out to me on Facebook, message me, let's connect and talk.
Awesome. So fantastic. Yes. If you're thinking of writing a book, get a hold of Kathy because she's gonna make it like it's not as hard as it sounds when you work with her.
It really is. 'Cause the thing is the information's all right here. We just need to get it on paper.
Yes.
And I mentioned Lisa's book earlier, Abundance Now. That book she did, that was her 7th book. She did that one from interview. They interviewed her and they transcribed it. So it's all her content, all her words, all her information, but she didn't have to write it. And some people get stuck in the writing process. So we have
Mhm.
that option as well.
Oh, amazing. Ooh, wasn't that amazing? Kathy is such an inspiration. I would love to know, what was your favorite takeaway? What was your favorite nugget? What screamed out at you the loudest and the strongest and the boldest? Put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear. Also, be sure to check the description. I've got some free resources for you. If you got value out of this video, don't forget to hit subscribe and hit that bell so you get notified every time I release new content. This is Davita signing out. See you next time.